During the War in Heaven, what guns and other weapons did the Necrons use to break apart and defeat their own gods for future Pokemon tournaments? That's what we are looking at today. The Catan enslaved the Necrons, but once their enemies were beaten, the Necrons turned on their would-be gods, who are said to not be killable as they are a fundamental part of the universe. The Necrons might disprove that. One thing we do know about the weapons used to shatter the Catan was that after the Silent King removed the knowledge of those dread weapons from the minds of his warriors, he feared what they might later be used for. And you know how crazy Necron tech can be sometimes. However, we know they are identified in Gladius Relics of War and are named as an Aeonic device. And I have to take the leap that this is the same as an Aeonic orb. We have an excerpt which ties it to that. A spider raised a cherished gift from the Silent King, saved from the days of rebellion, an Aeonic device explicitly made to kill a Catan. Though of course it might not quite reach those heady heights. For the 101, an Aeonic orb is powered by a fragment of a star. This device is then placed in a containment field on a skimmer platform. The field can be weakened to unleash solar flares from that contained star. I find it interesting that the energy they consume from the stars is also something that can hurt the Catan, where other things struggle. These weapons were dubbed hypercannons. We know the best crit tech in the galaxy brought them before the Nightbringer. No, he didn't miss the big cannon staring at his Catan face. It was brought to the Nightbringer under a web of deception, which is quite appropriate. It was bound within an array of necrodermis containment units and taken under the rule of those it once called slaves. The tribute the Catan would think was a meal, some part of a star to feast on, it wasn't, and it made a big badaboom to break apart the Catan. It's told in a more colourful way to us in this next section. About them, the Catan saw only slaves, savage and simple beings content to feed the dying fires. They should instead have been blades, each brought from a billion pinpricks of starlight. Upon the chimeric way, they fell upon Azagorod, the Nightbringer, that which the Eldari knew as Kalis Ra, fear in corporal form, who sowed the fields of nightmare, whose shadow loomed long in mortal thoughts, and entwined eternal with death's embrace. With the eye of Cathantar, they set the gaze of the celestial upon Azagorod, and in doing so did they burn away the shadows that coiled about it. Sudden was its sundering, cataclysmic its demise, and the shards of its shattered form fell glinting into the void. So the hints there are pretty clear. A billion pinpricks of starlight and celestial gaze, referring to the star energy of the cannons, were used on him. And the Eye of Cathantar, I just think it's another name for a cannon that fires star energy. A star can easily be standing for an eye, and the light would burn the shadows away, because that's what it does. There is also a more powerful weapon that did not shatter a Catan, but destroyed one, slew one, the Flare Catan. From Rain, the twice-dead king, the construct was a cylinder, plain and near featureless, and formed from what appeared to be white stone. It was connected to the chamber's ceiling by pulsing gravitic tethers, slanting downwards, and it tapered to a point where a slim torus of deep orange crystal was fixed. It must have been concealed somewhere in the structure of the Acrops since the days of Zarek's war, since the battle of the Sokar Gate. That is where the Necrons slew it. There was a weapon of Mentep's devising, which was installed on this ship on Zarek's orders, while it lay in orbit around Corner Tight. I know of this, Altic said, although he could not fathom now how it was that he did. Mentep had been searching for this weapon in secret since the voyage began, and now Zot had completed his work. The weapon is retrieved, and is ready for use again. And we jump forward a bit in time here. An order is given, fire, and we see the destructive beam that would have been focused on the Catan. Here it's aimed at the planet below. A thin white beam appeared for an instant, connecting the ship and the mist below. It made no sound and cast no light, and When it winked out, there was no sign it had ever fired, until at last the cloud below began to part. Drazak is the name of the planet. Beneath its shroud was a world of monolithic blankness. After the use of this weapon, a single city sat over its pole, sprawling a few leagues across, but beyond its walls there was only a sphere of inert stone, the colour of alabaster, featureless save for the faint suggestion of clouding in its depths. There was no warmth in the planet's core, and not a drop of moisture in its thin, inert atmosphere. Occasionally, its surface was broken with low hills, and the valleys choked with broken scree, but otherwise there was only a perpetual expanse of smooth white stone, untroubled by even the faintest stirring of wind under an endless starlit night. To the Necron mind, it was a paradise, and a planet scoured of life, ready for the Necrons to take it over. So you can see how it's used, a mobile weapon carried on a ship. When facing the Catan, it could have moved around and struck at it from different angles, or maybe there were several attacking it from different angles, but also it might have been used on the Catan after it had been out for a night of feasting. So the last excerpt explained the damage it can do. The next is a direct memory of its use during the War in Heaven on the Flare Catan. The horizon is broken, and the whole of the sky is alight. The void itself is cracked, and through its impossible wounds rise the death groans of gods, heard everywhere at once as they shake the foundations of reality. The last cataclysmic acts of the War in Heaven are at hand, and before him, too fast and terrible to behold, lies the Sokar Gate. The gunner cannot bear to look at the bright horror within the gate, but knows he must keep his gaze steady, no matter what shadow is burned on his mind after. If the nightmare weapon is to finish its task, Mentep, who designed the weapon, realizes now, far too late, what darkness his rapture for knowledge has led him into. Mentep, who, in the terrible silence after the infernal tool had done its will go on to watch the kings gather around their mortally wounded prey. For some of the other Catan, we can make questionable guesses how they were held in place. The Catan known as the Outsider is of a type of Catan you don't hear about. He is a free Catan. He's not bound by the Necrons, but bound by a device, a place that is watched by the Eldar. So this may have a hint of Eldar technology in it. I think it might be the following device, found by Cole and Alpha Primus near a Necron held area. We're told it was a chamber, tomb of the gods, said Primus, wrapped in chains of empirical energy. This black stone is tuned for psi amplification. Primus looked around the endless dark. The sarcophagus and its uncanny chains cast a patch of light of conflicting blue and orange. Perhaps something similar is used to hold the Outsider, the warp energy used to contain him. Since the Catan don't like the warp energy, it's like asking a cat to get into a bath. So there are some of the weapons used by the Necrons to defeat the Catan. Perhaps in terms of the warp energy part, with some aid from the Eldar. And speaking of Eldar weapons, there is a bear of powerful one that might have been tied to the old ones, being a weapon of last resort. Click in the corner, check out the video.